You're listening to the Mind Your Autistic Brain podcast, the show for late identified autistics. Each week, you will hear the autism journey of another late identified person, including their hardest part, their best part, and insights they share just for you. So you know you are not alone on this journey, my friend. Find your person and community here each week. And don't miss the special editions of Creator Spotlight and Hot Topic with your hostess with the mostest, Social Autie. That's me, Carole Jean. Let's get started. Welcome to Mind Your Autistic Brain, the talk show for late identified autistics. Today, my guest is Carole Jean, and he hosts the YouTube channel, What is Autism? I was so fortunate and honored to be a guest on his show a couple weeks ago, and Carole asks the question, what is autism? And it is such a fantastic show, and he introduces some fantastic people, and you really need to go check it out. Carole, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So Carole, now that we're flipping the script a little bit and you're the guest this time, share with us your autism story. What's your autism journey been?
Sure. I'm 28 years old, and I was diagnosed right at the end of last year, pretty recently. I've known that I was autistic for about probably 3 years or so. I actually suspected someone else in my family was autistic, or as I thought back then, I thought they might have Asperger's. And I started looking at the symptoms just out of curiosity. And then just, I guess, very quickly realized that all of those things applied to me very directly. I didn't realize how many, I guess, specific elements there were to autism. I just viewed it more plainly, probably the way that most people view it, is some sort of like just pure like inability to interact socially. I didn't realize all the other aspects of it. And so I kind of at one point, like 2 or 3 years ago, just everything started falling into place. Then I guess slowly over time, I began to recognize more aspects of my behavior and my personality as consistent with autism, and started to embrace it more as a fundamental aspect of my identity and how I make choices in my life and how I perceive myself. And that led me to then wanting to seek a diagnosis, because I just needed that sense of like clarity or closure on it, so that I could just feel confident, like accepting that that's that I'm justified in viewing that as a really significant part of my identity. And that's where I am now.
I love that. That's how you have experienced it. So what was sort of the big aha moment for you in that journey of discovery?
Well, it was that moment that I talked about. I was just looking up the symptoms because I just became curious about it one night, and I remember reading through the symptoms and just like thinking to myself, at first, like, oh, well, that could apply to me, and then after I did that about 5 or 10 times, I was like, wait, maybe I'm I'm the problem here. Like,
maybe there's something to this.
Yeah.
It's not.
I was like, what?
Harder.
This describes everyone, right? And then I was like, oh wait, these are all the things that I know that I'm a little different from everyone else on. And so it was a bit shocking in that moment, but it's a bit, I don't think you could get to the point that we are in our lives without constantly thinking, that we don't understand why other people do this thing or that thing, and wondering why we're so different, and wondering if we're crazy, and wondering if we like are just not getting something that's obvious. And so even though it's a big shock to the system in some sense, it's also, like I said, it does feel like things falling into place in another way.
So Charlie, since you started your autism journey, since you got your validation, your official piece of paper that says, Charlie, this is you, what has been the hardest part of your autism journey for you?
Since I got the diagnosis?
Just from the time you went, oh, by the way, this is a whole lot of things lining up.
Right. The hardest part was actually the pre-diagnosis period, especially like the immediate I shouldn't say the immediate pre-diagnosis period. The period in which I was getting diagnosed was very difficult for me.
Why was that?
Because at that point, I was dealing with a lot of like imposter syndrome, as you would call it, thinking like, okay, I know that I'm autistic on some level, but we don't really know enough about this thing to say whether people are actually like more autistic or less autistic, or whether it just manifests itself in different ways. Like there's really not enough like scientific information on the genetics of it to say, and so it's not clear whether or not some people are kind of autistic, like it kind of seems like that probably is the case, because it is something that's comprised of a lot of different genetic factors. And so when you think about it and you identify with it in yourself, you go through this, or at least I went through this critical process of wondering whether or not I was attributing too much of my behavior and my identity to autism. And
oh, I do. And
yes.
I think so many people just resonated with what you just said, because that is a big part of that sort of what I call the abyss part.
Yeah.
Where you're like, okay, I'm pretty sure, but what am I overthinking? What am I just like internalizing from what I think I've experienced? And you go through this whole sort of imposter syndrome thing. So so how did you sort of start to align and process and be able to, did you have to get that official piece of paper before you could say, okay, I'm done feeling like this? Or were you kind of got to it before there?
I hate to say, because I know some people don't have as much access to getting a diagnosis. So I wish that I had a more like answer that I came to some sort of internal solution. But the getting the diagnosis was what really rectified things for me. Not that we still don't know whether or not it's rational to say, that some people are just kind of autistic or more autistic or less autistic. It's kind of this open question. And so I still do experience the imposter syndrome to some extent, but much less so since I get the diagnosis, simply for the matter, obviously, that I just had a professional person delve deep into my psychology and come out and say, yes, you are autistic. I think a huge part of the imposter syndrome was and is, but it's just less so now, the tendency, rationally, I think, to map on my perception of autism to other people, in the sense that what other people would think if I told them I was autistic, and the fact that a lot of people would be like, well, you don't fit into the box of what I presume an autistic person to be, which would be someone who is more whose autism is more pronounced in a way that people recognize. So like someone who might have more more extreme, like idiosyncratic, like social behavior, and so it's this question of like, if I talk about being autistic, will other people believe me, or like kind of give me that look like you're not really autistic, you're just trying to be different or something like that. And that prevents you from talking about it, obviously, around other people, even though as it takes a bigger and bigger part of your perception of yourself, it becomes something that's relevant in many conversations, especially with people who are close to you. Like, it's not something that you necessarily need to bring up all the time, but just like if you're talking with someone and something comes up, which things will come up, and I'm not just talking about like things that like you need an excuse, like you said something offensive and you need people to understand that like you didn't realize that was offensive. That stuff does happen, but I'm also just talking about the extent that you would just want to talk with someone that you're friendly or close with about something and be able to just mention like, well, I'm autistic, so that's probably why I think about it this way, or something like that, or that's why I made this choice, and
not have them like throw on the brakes and go, what?
Yeah, exactly. But the fact that
you don't look autistic.
Yeah, the fact that
really?
they probably won't acknowledge it. And it's not even that they might say that they don't acknowledge it, but that they'll just kind of pull back and be like, oh, okay, or even, feel like you're demanding sympathy from them or something. That is
that's interesting, Charlie, because I think a lot of people, feel or experience that same reservation. It's like, are they going to then behave differently toward me?
Yeah.
And how is that going to change our relationship? Like that was when I asked the Mind Your Autistic Brain community, hey, what are some of the biggest questions that you guys have, or just like concerns that you have when it comes to sharing your autistic with other people? And that was a big one. That was a really big one.
Yeah. I think, and the diagnosis doesn't necessarily help with that, in some sense, because like, I mean, even if you're diagnosed, it's like, oh, he must be really autistic, you know what I mean? But it's like, the diagnosis just helped with the sensation that I can say it if I want to. And not that I anticipate getting to some sort of argument where someone's going to be like, you're not autistic. And I'm going to be like, I have a diagnosis, read it and weep, but it's more so like that I just don't have to gauge my own perception of myself based on other people's uninformed skepticism.
Oh, good one, Charlie. I like that. So if that has been sort of the hardest part of your journey, what's been the best part of your journey? What's been the thing that was just like, this has been amazing. This has been transformative and life-changing. This has been fantastic.
Letting go of expectations other people have, of like what you're supposed to do with your life. I think just not caring about what other people want you to be and do. It's a kind of a general thing to say, but I think like as a musician, is like my primary interest. I don't have like the same kind of like career ambitions that other people have, and I'm not really sure that I want like kids, family kind of thing, and all these sorts of, I just want to lose myself in creativity and things that I'm interested in. And I know deep down, I've always known deep down that that's what's most important to me. And that that's the method which I derive meaning from life and what I want to get out of life, and that not doing those things is, does make life very meaningless for me. And it's always been weighing that more untraversed pathway against the one that everyone else is on, and everyone else feeling that pressure of everyone else wanting you to get on the normal path, because they feel like if you're not on that path, then you want to be, you just can't do it, or you just like, you need to get yourself together and get on the normal path. And I think just being able to recognize that there's really something different about me cognitively that makes me happier and more fulfilled doing other things and pursuing other goals than other people, is the most important realization that I imagine other autistic people can have about themselves. Because if you're just trying to be happy and fulfilled by other people's standards, it's going to be very unrewarding. In the long run, you have to realize that the reason you're being pulled in that direction is because other people can't fully empathize and map their own desires and things that make them happy and things that give them meaning onto you because their minds are different than yours.
Oh, Charlie, I love that. I love it. So your best thing has been the freedom that you have found from escaping that thief of joy, which is the comparison trap, to be
Yes.
able to openly and just internally say, you know what I want from life is different and it looks different and success is defined differently in my life and it's perfectly valid. And I don't have to justify it or compare it or meet anybody else's standard. This is what's important to me. And
Yes.
I love that you're living that.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the other big realization on top of that is that I don't think it's merely a matter of that other people, I think that other people think and say and promote the idea that you should follow this particular path that suits them because other people, I mean, everyone does this to an extent, but people really want to feel like the way they're doing things is right. And the path that they're on is correct because there is no correct path and things are much more arbitrary than we like to acknowledge. And there's a sort of something that's scary and nihilistic about that, that there's no like objective meaning to life. And so everyone else who exists on this, well, I shouldn't say everyone else, but non-autistic people, like exist on this, this social plane where they're all in sort of agreement that by pursuing this life, and having these goals, we're doing the right thing, and that's what people are supposed to do, and that gives me some sort of social credit, and I can sort of climb the social hierarchy, and I can feel like sophisticated and accomplished, and that I've done the right things, and that's all fine. I'm not really, just like in a rebellious, angsty way, like raging against the fact that people do that. I understand that.
You big old anarchist, you.
Yeah. It's like I understand that people are trying to find meaning in life, and so there's some sort of meaning to get out of the more sensible pathways that make sense for most people, like pursuing a family and a career that allows them to have a certain amount of money so that they can go on vacation once a year, and et cetera, et cetera. I don't even want to marginalize it because that brings people happiness and fulfillment. But the thing is that people on top of that then decide that if you don't do that, you're doing it wrong, because that gives them a little more sense of that they're doing it right, because most people do it that way. And so it's a bit harder to dig yourself out of the hole if you're not like that, because it's not just acknowledging that you're different, but it's acknowledging that there's a little bit of a layer of superiority to the way that other people view the way that they view their lives, because that gives them a little extra meaning,
Somehow they think that this is the right way.
Yeah.
And that there's not other ways. And if you do it any other way than their right way, then it's not valid or it's not successful.
Yeah, I even think
it's all about that gauge and that measure of how you define success for yourself.
And it goes down like to little things too, like all sorts of little things that we as autistic people might do weirdly or differently because we just don't tap into that, the way you're supposed to do things. Like there are a million little examples of like, oh, you're not supposed to just eat that with that, or or just like it's weird that you will just eat like bread out of the bag, or something like that, and it's just, there's all sorts of little things that people like to judge other people for, like, and just think that's weird and you shouldn't do it that way. And then as an autistic person, you have to internalize those things and just carry them around with you at all times to be like, okay, don't do that in front of anyone else because they think that's weird, and don't pace around because people think that's weird. And I think that's just as important as to acknowledge that people view those major life choices as right. They also view so many little things as right that as an autistic person, you have to manage this, large sort of like scripture of social, it's like a social religion that people have of like all the little things that are right and wrong, and you have to be constantly conscious of them. And it exists all on that one thread of people making up all these things that allow themselves to feel like they're doing things the right way and that the way they do things is better because that gives them meaning. And again, it's fine that the people are pursuing meaning, but it's easy for people who do things the way that most people do them to impugn that sense of most people do it this way, so it's better on everything. And then that affects autistic people a lot because we're constantly dealing with that. And it
boy,
becomes very
is it exhausting.
Yeah. Yes,
Charlie,
exactly.
this conversation right here is exactly why I was so excited to have you come on my show after we talked on your show. Because I feel like Charlie's got so much to say, and I want to hear what Charlie has to say. So one of the questions that you ask at the end of your show is, what is the meaning of life?
Right. Okay. So obviously,
so now is your turn to answer.
Obviously now I can't, after everything I just said, I can't give any specific answer. It would be very hypocritical for me to do so. Let me tell you what the exact meaning of life is. All these other people are wrong.
No, I want to know about your opinion, like your feelings.
Yes. Well, I mean, the obvious thing to say about the meaning of life would be that there is no objective meaning of life. I mean,
Okay, wait a minute. I'm gonna take you off the hot seat on this one.
Okay.
How about instead, in your life today, how do you define success in your life, Charlie? What is a fulfilling, successful, this is like my perfect life, my perfect day. This is what this is to me right now. Because we know it all evolves.
Yeah. I think, and it is somewhat just answering the question of meaning as well for me. It's like transcendence, just like being able to push further with whatever it is that you find engaging in life. So for me, I like to be creative, and that's what I can get meaning out of life from, because to me, there is this, kind of, I'm a very existential person. There is this kind of nihilistic pull to like, what's the point? What's the meaning of it all? And by creating something that has some sort of sense of emotion to it, you're doing the most kind of visceral thing you can do to really reject the idea that there is no meaning. Even though there always will be no objective meaning, it's kind of like this defiance of that somewhat unfortunate, although at the same time fortunate, condition and existence that we have, which is that we don't know what to do with our lives because we just exist for, evolutionary reasons to, we're just, the product of billions of years of evolution of things trying to survive. And we're trying to move beyond that and find some sort of fulfillment and happiness. And it's always kind of a ghost that we're chasing. But if you are really able to just feel like there's something to be had in chasing that ghost, then that's the closest thing that you can really come to meaning. It's like you can never really escape the cage of mortality that we exist in the sense that like we're not going to exist forever. Everything's going to go away, essentially, et cetera, all these kind of dark thoughts you can have. But you can kind of break out of that cage into a bigger cage. And then you can break out of that bigger cage into another bigger cage and see what's outside that. And you're always going to be in a cage, but while you're alive, you might as well keep breaking out and trying to find something more. And for me, the way to do that primarily is through creativity, but not just artistic creativity, but also, I guess, just being able to explore ideas and thoughts and talk with other people and just talk about something like this, like how to find more meaning is in a sense meaningful as well. So it is, again, I come back to just that idea of transcendence, which is just about like trying to find something more. You're never going to be satisfied. You're always going to want something more. So just know that that's what you want. Just try and keep pushing for something more, because there's an infinite amount of things that you could find meaning in because you're creating the meaning.
That's one of the things that I really love. And that was one of the biggest aha sort of joyful things in my discovery was that there are awarenesses and whole other ways of thinking outside of my box that I'm in
Yeah.
currently. And it's a constant evolution of your box, right? And where those boundaries are and where you see sort of that box boundary being. And once you're aware of it, then you can go beyond it. But when you don't know it's there, you're in it, right? Without awareness. And I find that to be one of those things that's really one of the beautiful processes in the late identified autism journey that happens. It's sort of the awareness that this box that you think is here, that you didn't know was there, you now know it's here. And now you're going to push past it to the next box. And just sort of that process of internal evolution
Yeah. And
of self.
I think once you make the realization and maybe get the diagnosis, it's not just being able to push into another box, but that specific thing sort of frees you up to keep pushing forward and spiraling out, I guess, and like because it gives you the mechanism, which is the acceptance of your of the way that your brain works and the way that your brain is different, to be able to explore different things. Because that stuff that I was talking about like comparing yourself to other people and about the presumptions that other people make about the way they do things being right, and how exhausting that is, and all that sort of stuff, that those are walls that you build up that prevent you from breaking out of those boxes. And then a lot of us autistic people, and I know I'm this way, it's not just, I mean, like for me, I need to break out of those boxes as much as possible. Like that is, I understand some people like just getting inside a box and staying there, and that's what gives them fulfillment and meaning. So it's not even applicable to everyone, the idea that you're breaking out of those boxes. That's what some people don't like that. Now, I don't know, maybe they
Some
would
people
be
are
happier if
happy
they
in
did
their
it my way.
box, and we're going to
Yeah.
leave them right where they're
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah, exactly.
Those of us who are trying to break out and just see what the next box looks like, because we're so curious and we just want to know, we're just going to do it together.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I think it's the recognition and possible diagnosis of autism is, for an autistic person, obviously it just gives you those tools to break out further and expand as much as you want to, because it's all those reservations about not wanting to be different than other people and not being willing to acknowledge that the way that you think is differently, that stop you from expanding into the areas that you want to. Yes.
Charlie, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for sharing your voice and adding your insight and your autism journey and your story to the Mind Your Autistic Brain community. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.